There are two different checks being talked about in Washington right now. Both of them could put money in your pocket. One of them is aimed almost directly at you, and there is a sentence buried inside both proposals that almost nobody is reading. A sentence that says, if the government sends you this money and it later decides you were not supposed to get it, the government can take it back. Verified card. Source. Proposed direct payment frameworks reportedly include income verification and clawback provisions. Confirm current bill text before recording. Not a headline, not a rumor, a real clause sitting inside real drafts that could turn a check you already spent into a bill you did not see coming. That is the trap. And it is not the check itself. The check, if it ever comes, is a good thing. The trap is the gap between when the money arrives and when the government finishes deciding whether you were supposed to get it. You can spend it in that gap. And then the decision can go the other way. People think of a government check as final, yours, done, spent, forgotten. But a check sent out fast, based on old information, and reviewed slowly afterward, is not final at all. It is provisional, and almost nobody uses that word when they hand it to you. Now, before anything else, I need to give you the sentence that matters more than any number in this video. Neither of these checks is real yet. No bill has passed, no date has been set, no agency has a list of who gets paid. And I want to say something about why you keep hearing about this, month after month, when nothing has actually passed. These proposals get reintroduced, rewritten, and re-announced constantly. Every few months, a new headline treats an old idea as if it were breaking news. Verified card. Source. Direct payment proposals have been repeatedly introduced without enactment since the last payments in 2021. So a person watching the news casually could reasonably believe a check has been coming any day now for the better part of a year, because the story keeps returning, wearing a slightly different headline each time. The return of the story is not progress. A bill being reintroduced is not a bill advancing, and knowing the difference is most of what protects you here. There is a simple way to check this for yourself anytime without trusting me or anyone else. A real active payment has a source you can point to, a signed law, an agency announcement, a date published by the Treasury or the Social Security Administration on their own website, not somebody else's. If the only place a check exists is in videos and headlines, and never on an actual government page, then it is a proposal being discussed, not a payment being sent. That one test cuts through almost every false story you will ever hear about your money. Where does it live? If it does not live on a government website, it is not yet real. Verified card. Source. As of this recording, no federal stimulus legislation has been signed into law for 2026. Confirm current status before publishing. What exists is two competing ideas, moving through two very different rooms in Washington, and a lot of noise online pretending the outcome is already decided. And I want you to understand why that noise exists, because it is not an accident. A headline that says money is coming gets clicked far more than a headline that says a proposal was introduced. So the loudest version of every story is almost always the least accurate one, and the correction never travels as far as the original claim did. That gap between what travels and what is true is where people make real financial decisions on imaginary money, and it is exactly what this video exists to close. My name is Kevin. I read the rules so you do not have to. If you are new here, this channel exists for one reason. We read the fine print that decides what happens to your money, so you find out before the system decides for you. Subscribe and turn on the bell, because I am going to walk you through exactly what is real, what is not, and what to actually do while this plays out. And I want to promise you something up front, because a lot of channels will not. I am not going to tell you a check is coming to get you to keep watching. If it is not real, I am going to say it is not real, even though that is the less exciting thing to say. Because the people who tell you what you want to hear are not on your side. They're on the side of the click, and you deserve better than that, especially about money you are counting on. Let me start with the one getting the most attention, because it is the one built around tariffs. For a while now, there has been talk out of the administration about sending money to Americans, funded by revenue collected from tariffs on imported goods. Verified card. Source. Proposed tariff dividend or rebate payments discussed by the administration. Confirm current framework before recording. The idea sounds simple. Tariffs bring in money. Some of that money goes back out to households. But there is a serious complication sitting underneath that idea, and it is not political. It is legal. A court ruling has already thrown the underlying tariffs themselves into question. Verified card. Source. Legal challenges to the tariff authority underlying the proposed dividend. Confirm current court status before recording. Which means the money this plan depends on is not settled. You cannot reliably send out relief funded by revenue that a court might still say was never legally collected in the first place. That is not a talking point. That is the actual mechanical problem sitting in the middle of this proposal. And there is a second version of this idea floating around as well, sometimes described as a refund rather than a dividend, tied to tariff money that was already collected. Verified card. Source. Tariff refund proposals following legal challenges to tariff authority. Confirm current status before recording. Even setting the legal question aside for a moment, think about how a refund like that would actually work. A tariff is paid, at the border, by the company importing the goods, not by you, directly, at the register, which means a refund of that money does not automatically become a check in your mailbox. It becomes a check to the importer, unless a separate piece of legislation specifically directs it back out to households instead. That distinction gets erased completely in most of the headlines, and it is a big one. The money existing somewhere in a government account is not the same thing as the money being legally required to reach you. Let me put a face on that because it is easy to lose in the abstraction. Orville is 73, from Chillicothe, Missouri. He runs a small engine repair shop out of his garage, mostly mowers and tillers, mostly for neighbors. He heard that tariff money was going to be refunded, and being a small businessman, he did the math on what a refund might mean for him. But Orville buys parts that are imported. He is closer to the importer end of this than the average retiree is, and even he could not get a straight answer about whether a refund would reach him, the shop owner who paid more for parts, or stop at the distributor he bought them from. If a man who actually deals with imported goods every week cannot tell where a tariff refund would land, then the retiree being told on the internet that a tariff check is coming to their mailbox is being sold a certainty that does not exist. The honest answer to who gets tariff money back is, it depends entirely on legislation that has not been written, and possibly on a court ruling that has not happened. Now the second one, and this is the one I think deserves far more attention than it is getting, because of who it is actually aimed at. There is a proposal in the Senate for an annual payment of $3,000. Verified card. Source. Sanders and Khanna proposal for an annual direct payment funded by a wealth tax. Confirm current bill status before recording. And unlike a broad stimulus for everyone, this one is targeted. Households at or below a certain income level. A group that includes a great many people on Social Security, on fixed incomes, living on exactly the kind of budget this channel talks about every week. The argument behind it is straightforward. The cost of groceries, prescriptions, and utilities has climbed faster than the raise your check received. A direct payment, the argument goes, closes that gap faster than any policy change working its way through the system over years. And I want to give the other side of that argument fairly, because you deserve the whole picture, not a sales pitch for one proposal. The case against a payment like this is not that people do not need help. Almost nobody argues that. The case against it is about what a large, sudden injection of money does to prices. Verified card. Source. Economists debate the inflationary effects of broad direct payments. The concern is that if you hand a great many households a few $1,000s at once, some of that simply gets absorbed into higher prices, and the relief you felt in the deposit gets eaten back at the register. Reasonable people genuinely disagree about how large that effect is, but it is a real part of why a proposal like this does not just sail through, even among people sympathetic to the goal. I am not telling you which side is right. I am telling you that when you hear this debated, that is what the fight is actually about underneath the slogans. Not whether you deserve help. How to give it without quietly taking part of it back through prices. Now, I want to be honest with you about where this stands, because false hope is its own kind of harm. This proposal has been introduced. It has not passed a committee. It does not have the votes it would need right now. Verified card. Source. Sanders' proposal status in Congress. Confirm current committee status before recording. There is real resistance to it. Concerns about the deficit. Disagreement about whether a payment this size should be narrow or broad. And the oldest question in Washington, which is always the same question. Who pays for it and how? And in this case, the answer to how is unusually specific, which is part of why it has drawn so much attention. The proposal is funded by an annual tax on a small number of billionaires, rather than by general borrowing. Verified card. Source. Proposed billionaire wealth tax funding mechanism for the direct payment plan. Supporters argue that funding structure is exactly why it deserves serious consideration, because it does not add directly to the deficit the way earlier stimulus rounds did. Opponents argue that a tax structured this narrowly invites years of legal challenges from the very small number of people it targets, and that legal fights of that kind can tie up implementation for a long time, even if the underlying bill eventually passes. Both of those things can be true at once. The funding mechanism is genuinely different from anything used before. And genuinely different also means genuinely untested. And untested tends to move slowly through Washington. Let me tell you about Garland. Garland is 76. He lives in Pryor, Oklahoma, 38 years running a feed store his father started. He heard about the $3,000 proposal from his daughter, who read him a headline over the phone. Garland did what a careful man does. He got out a piece of paper. His truck needed a transmission. His wife's hearing aids needed replacing. He had been putting both off, and $3,000 would have covered exactly enough of both to finally act. He called the shop and scheduled the transmission work, told them he would pay when it was done, in a few weeks, when the check came. There is no check coming in a few weeks. There may be no check at all. And Garland is now the owner of a scheduled repair bill with no plan behind it, because a headline moved faster than the truth did. And I want to be fair to Garland here, because his mistake was not stupidity. It was trust. He trusted that a headline about a Senate proposal meant the same thing as a headline about a signed law. Most people do. The words look almost identical on a screen, and the difference between them is a distinction most of us were never taught to make. He called the shop back a week later, once his daughter had actually read him the details rather than the headline, and pushed the repair off again. The transmission still needs fixing. It will get fixed when there is real money for it, not projected money. That is the entire lesson sitting inside Garland's story, and it costs nothing to learn it the easy way instead of the way he almost learned it. I am not telling you this proposal is worthless. I am telling you it is not money yet. There is a difference between hope and a plan, and Garland built a plan on hope. Now, here is the part almost nobody is talking about, and it is the reason I opened this video the way I did. Both frameworks, as currently written, include language about verifying your income and clawing back money if you turn out not to have qualified. Verified card. Source. Draft direct payment proposals reportedly include eligibility verification and repayment provisions. Confirm current bill language before recording. We have seen this before. After the payments sent out in 2021, a real number of people later received a notice saying they had been overpaid because their income situation had changed between the year the government used to calculate eligibility and the year the check actually arrived. Verified card. Source. Post-2021 stimulus overpayment notices tied to income changes between tax years. Picture that happening to somebody on this list. You retire partway through a year. Your income drops. But the government calculated your eligibility off an older return, from before you retired, when your income looked different. The check goes out based on old information. Then a review happens. And the notice that arrives is not more money. It is a bill asking for some of it back. And I want to walk through exactly why this happens, because once you see the mechanism, you can protect yourself from it. The government cannot know your current year income in real time. It does not have this year's numbers yet. So when it needs to decide who qualifies for a payment quickly, it reaches for the most recent completed tax return it has on file. Verified card. Source. Federal payments are commonly calculated using the most recently filed tax return available. For most working people, last year and this year look about the same, so no problem ever appears. But for people near a retirement, the 2 years can look nothing alike. The year before you retired, your income was a full working wage. The year after, it might be Social Security and a little else. So picture the timing. A payment goes out using the higher, older year, and you qualify. Then the review catches up to your newer, lower year, or the reverse, depending on how the rule is written, and suddenly the math that made you eligible no longer holds. The check already landed, you already spent it, and the correction arrives with your name on it. Toda, that is not a punishment for doing anything wrong. It is a timing mismatch between how fast money goes out and how slowly income gets verified. And the person caught in the middle of it is almost always someone whose life changed recently. A retirement, a death of a spouse, a drop in hours. The people most likely to get a check like this, older Americans on shifting incomes, are the exact people most exposed to the clawback inside it. Torta, let me tell you about Winifred. Winifred is 70, from Nacogdoches, Texas. She retired from the school cafeteria 18 months before any of this. Her income the year before she retired looked nothing like her income does now. If a payment like this had gone out using her older return, and she had received money she was not actually eligible for under her current lower income, she would have had every reason to believe it was simply a gift that finally arrived. And months later, a letter arrives asking for some of it back. Money she has already spent. Money she assumed, reasonably, was hers to keep. And think about what that letter does to a person like Winifred beyond the dollars. She did nothing wrong. She retired, which is what she was supposed to do. She received a check the government sent her, which she had no reason to question. She spent it on things she needed because that is what the money was for. And the reward for all of that is a notice implying she took something she should not have. The shame in that is real, and it is misplaced, and it stops people from fighting a notice they could actually win. They assume the letter means they did something wrong, so they quietly pay it back rather than question it. That instinct to go quiet and comply is the single most expensive reflex a person can have when a government notice arrives, and it is exactly the reflex these situations produce. This is not a hypothetical designed to scare you. It happened to real people in 2021 under a much simpler program than either of these, and the language currently sitting in both of these frameworks would allow it to happen again. And that is exactly why I built the thing I am about to tell you about. Because Garland scheduled a repair he could not yet pay for, and Winifred could someday open a letter asking for money back that she never should have counted as hers. And both of those things happened for the same reason. Nobody sat either of them down and separated the proposal from the promise. Nobody explained that hope and law are two very different things, and that the gap between them is exactly where real damage happens. That is what the Quiet Rules is. It is the drawer version of everything I cover on this channel. Written large, written simple. How to tell a real payment from a proposed one. What to check before you believe a headline. How to protect yourself from a clawback before it ever becomes a possibility. So the person hearing about the next check from a neighbor or a headline knows exactly what is real and what to do about it, instead of building a plan on a rumor. The paper remembers for you. That is the entire point of paper. You can find it at kevinexplains.shop. The link is right below this video, or scan the QR code on your screen right now. It is also in the pinned comment at the top. And there is a 7-day guarantee. Always. If it does not hand you something you did not have before, you send it back. Because the alternative is a good man scheduling a transmission repair against a check that may never come. If nobody has ever laid out the real difference between a proposal and a payment for you before today, do me one favor. Subscribe and turn on the bell, because this channel reads the fine print that nobody mails to your house. So here is what I want you to actually do, and this is the part that matters more than any headline. First, if your income changed meaningfully in the last year, retirement, reduced hours, a household change, make sure your most recent tax return reflects that. Whichever year the government eventually uses to calculate eligibility, you want your real, current situation on file. And this matters for far more than a hypothetical check. Your filed return affects your Medicare premium calculations, any marketplace subsidy, and every income-based benefit you touch. Filing an accurate, current return protects you, regardless of what happens with either of these proposals. Second, make sure your direct deposit information and your address are current, both with the IRS and with the Social Security Administration, if that is your main income. Verified card. Source. Direct deposit and address updates through irs.gov and SSA. Confirm current procedures before recording. Not because a check is confirmed, because if either of these does move, it will move fast, and the people whose information is already correct are always the first to be paid and the last to be caught in a delay. And there is a specific version of this that catches people every single time a payment goes out. The people who moved. The people who changed banks. The people whose direct deposit was set up for a tax refund years ago and never updated since. Verified card. Source. Outdated address and direct deposit information is a common cause of payment delays and misdirected funds. When a payment is sent to a closed account or an old address, it does not simply find you. It bounces, it gets held, and untangling it can take longer than the payment itself took to authorize. 15 minutes confirming your information now, on a normal day, prevents a month of phone calls later on the worst possible day. And it protects you whether or not any of these checks ever exists, because that same information governs your tax refund and every other federal payment you already receive. Third, and this is the one that will save somebody watching this real money. Be deeply skeptical of anything that asks you to click a link, enter your information, or verify your eligibility to claim a payment. Real government payments, when they exist, do not require you to enter information on a website to unlock them. If your information is already correctly on file, that is the entire requirement. Verified card. Source, SSA and IRS, warn that legitimate payments do not require clicking a link or entering information to claim. Anything asking you to act urgently to secure a check that is not yet law is not a government website. It is somebody using the exact confusion this video is trying to clear up. And the timing of these scams is precise, which is how you can spot them. They surge at exactly the moments when a proposal is in the news. The scammer does not have to convince you a check exists. The headlines already did that for them. All they have to do is offer to help you claim the check you already believe is coming. That is why a real, believable-sounding request to verify your details lands so well during a news cycle like this one. It is riding on top of a real proposal, borrowing its credibility. So the rule holds no matter how official it looks. The government does not need you to click anything to send you money it has decided to send. If your information is on file, you are already in line. If it is not, you fix that directly at the real agency, never through a link somebody sent you. Now, I want to give you the honest picture of where this actually stands, timeline-wise, because that matters more than which proposal you are rooting for. The tariff-funded idea has a real legal obstacle sitting in front of it, and legal obstacles do not resolve on a political calendar. They resolve on a court's calendar, and courts are not fast. The $3,000 proposal has a longer runway in a different sense. It is more of a push heading into the fall legislative calendar, something that could gain strength if economic pressure on households keeps building, especially heading into an election year where lawmakers feel real pressure to show up for older, fixed-income voters. The honest, realistic read is this. Some version of targeted relief becoming law before the end of this year is possible. Not guaranteed. Probably smaller than either headline number if it happens at all, and almost certainly slower than the version currently circulating online. And there is one more piece of realism I owe you, because it is the part the exciting videos always leave out. Even in the best case, where a bill passes and is signed, there is a long distance between a law and a deposit. An agency has to be told to build the payment system. Eligibility rules have to be turned into actual computer logic. Deposit information has to be gathered and checked. That machinery takes months, even after everyone agrees on the money. Verified card. Source. Implementing a new federal direct payment program requires significant administrative lead time after enactment. So even if you heard tomorrow that a check was signed into law, the honest expectation would still be a wait measured in months, not days. Which means any headline attaching a specific near-term month to a payment that is not even law yet is, by definition, ahead of what the process could actually deliver. The calendar simply does not allow for it. And I say that not to discourage you, but to protect you from the disappointment merchants. Because when a specific month passes and no check arrives, a whole new wave of videos appears explaining why it was delayed and promising a new month, and the cycle starts again. Each turn of that cycle costs somebody a decision made too early, a bill left unpaid, a repair scheduled, a little bit of hope spent on a date that was never real to begin with. You do not have to ride that cycle. You can simply wait for the word law and let everyone else exhaust themselves chasing months. The people who come out ahead in that scenario are not the people who spent the fastest or believed the loudest headline. They are the people whose paperwork was already correct, whose information was already current, and who did not build a real financial decision on top of a proposal that had not yet become a law. And I want to give you something more useful than a warning here. I want to give you the door. If a clawback provision like this ever does become law, and you receive a notice asking for money back, you are not automatically required to simply hand it over. There is very often a process to dispute a clawback. to show that the income the government used to calculate your eligibility does not reflect your actual circumstances, to request a waiver if repaying it would create genuine hardship. Verified card. Source: Federal Overpayment Dispute and Hardship Waiver Processes, generally available for benefit clawbacks. Confirm process for any specific program before recording. That process existed after the 2021 payments too. Real people used it and had overpayment notices reduced or canceled entirely. The people who did not use it are the ones who assumed a notice from the government was the final word. It almost never is, in any program, for any reason. There is nearly always a door. And that is exactly what the quiet rules holds for this specific situation as well. What a clawback notice actually looks like. The exact process to dispute one. The hardship waiver language that gets a notice taken seriously instead of dismissed. For this and for every rule in this video, sitting in the drawer, in plain English. So that if a notice like this ever arrives, you know on the first day what to do with it, not months into worrying about it. You can find it at kevinexplains.shop. The link is in the description and in the pinned comment at the top. Or scan the QR code on your screen right now. 7-day guarantee, no questions asked. Because the alternative is a woman like Winifred, quietly paying back a notice she had every right to challenge, simply because nobody told her a door existed. Now let me pull this together because I want you to leave with clarity, not just more noise. 1. 2 real proposals exist. Neither is law. Neither has a payment date. Anyone telling you otherwise is either wrong or selling something. 2. The tariff-funded idea has a genuine legal problem underneath it that has nothing to do with politics and will not resolve quickly. 3. The $3,000 proposal is targeted at people like you, but it has not passed a committee and faces real resistance. 4. Both current frameworks include income verification and the possibility of a clawback, which is exactly what happened to real people after the 2021 payments. Now here's your checklist. 3 things this week. 1. If your income changed in the last year, get your most recent tax return accurate and filed. Not for the stimulus. For everything else it touches, which is more than most people realize. 2. Confirm your direct deposit and address information is current with both the IRS and Social Security. It costs nothing and it protects you regardless of what Washington does. 3. If anything online asks you to click, verify, or claim before you can receive a payment, close it. A real payment will never ask that of you. And a 4th, because it costs nothing and it protects the people around you. Share the real status of these proposals with somebody in your life who has been asking about them. Not the headline, the actual status. A proposal that has been introduced but not passed. A legal question still sitting in front of a court. That single conversation can stop somebody you love from doing exactly what Garland did. Let me leave you with the thing I most want you to keep. Garland scheduled a repair against money that has not arrived. Winifred could someday be handed a bill for a gift she was told was hers. Neither of them did anything foolish. They believed a headline the way anyone would, because the headline sounded confident and the need was real. The people who get hurt by moments like this are almost never the people who ignored the news. They're the people who acted on it one step too early, before the difference between a proposal and a payment had been made clear to them. So watch this space if you want to. I will keep watching it too, but do not spend $1 or schedule a repair or count on a check until the word law actually applies to it. And if you want me to look at your own specific situation, whether your return is filed correctly, whether your information is current, whether something about your own household needs a closer look before any of this moves, email me. The address is on your screen and in the description below. I read every one. Washington moves in its own time, on its own schedule, and no amount of watching this channel will speed that up. What watching this channel can do is make sure that whenever the real news finally arrives, you are already standing in the right place to receive it, instead of catching up from behind. I am Kevin. Thanks for watching. Do not forget to check the quiet rules at kevinexplains.shop.